here from the Bluecopa's marketing team. And the webinar session today will be on the role of data in FP&A teams. So we have two interesting speakers today, Auro Sen and Raghava. Auro Sen is a modern CFO and one of the Inspire top 50 CFOs of Southeast Asia. Auro has built, 0 to 1 finance teams across multiple organizations, big organizations such as, IBM and up and coming startups like Ula, Book My Show, and currently at Aquarev as well. Auro loves playing football and traveling. Auro, I have a question around that as well. And currently, Auro lives out of Jakarta. Welcome, Auro.
Thank you, Guru. Thank you for the generous introduction. Great to be here.
Great, great. So my question to you, which is your favorite football club?
Manchester United.
Oh, glory, glory, Manchester United then.
Absolutely.
Perfect. And our next speaker is the in-house Raghava. Raghava is one of the co-founders of Bluecopa and one of the top finance leaders in India. Raghava is a finance nerd himself, and he's previously worked across huge organizations and led teams in Wipro, Open, and currently is a co-founder at Bluecopa. Raghava is a voracious reader, and I can attest to that. Raghava travels with a Kindle to every place he travels. And yeah, welcome, Raghava. Welcome to the session.
Thank you, Guru, and amazing to share the panel with you, Auro. Looking forward to it.
Same here, my pleasure.
I'm super excited for the conversations that's gonna come up. So let's quickly get started. To everyone who's joined in, so we have a sort of questions set up for Auro that we want Auro to explain further on. If you have any questions as well, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section and we'll pick them up and Auro will answer them for you. So let's get started with the questions, Auro. So the first one I have for you is what's the role of FP&A teams and why is it crucial for any organization? And I want to set the basis to what FP&A teams are. So if you could just explain more about that.
Thanks, Guru. Yeah, I think FP&A as over the past 5 to 10 years is really a department which is taking up space, a lot of pace, right? It's getting a lot of traction. This department essentially is a big name. I mean, FP&A is financial planning and analysis. If we just look at it from the word itself, it has a lot of depth to it, right? The department in itself starts off right from like the word says planning, right? So the initial budgeting, planning, forecasting, and goes on to what that planning is bringing, the actual numbers. And from that actual numbers, what is the story that those numbers are telling you, which is where the analysis part comes in. Sometimes there's a conception or a misconception rather that FP&A and accounting somehow get merged together. But usually when looking at FP&A as a department, it's best to see it as a complete separate department who is not dealing with the bookkeeping, but actually what the story is coming out from the bookkeeping and the rest of the data that is there around it, right? Broadly speaking, it's a crucial department for every company because, like I always say, without planning, no company can work as much as big or the smallest of the companies. Without planning, nothing can work. And the FP&A is the one who leads it. But planning without knowing the future is where the analysis comes in. And that's where the FP&A analysis part becomes crucial for any company's success.
Got it. So would you say this function to be extremely collaborative, given that they are, procuring information, data, and context from a lot of internal teams? So how would you explain that? But how collaborative do you think the team should be?
Yeah, massively collaborative. I think one of the key things about FP&A is that it cannot work out of a silo. It needs to be a business partner. It needs to work with the business finance team, the commercial operations, even the HR and tech teams for that matter. Because it starts right off again from the planning stage, right? If you're planning on your own as a finance guy, you'll make probably a very conservative plan, which might look good on paper, but it might not be the actual story of what is there.
That's true.
In order to make a plan which is, more optimistic, but not too optimistic and as realistic as possible, you need to gather the inputs from the salespeople, the tech people, the HR people, and figure that how it fits into your board-driven targets, right? That is not possible if you're operating only as a silo from a finance guy's mind. Now, the same way, This is on the planning part. Once the actions and the results come in, the numbers might show that, let's say, somewhere a trend is going down, a trend is going up. A finance guy, without actually knowing what's happening or understanding the business model, cannot say the exact reason for what it is. He can point out the percentage it's gone down. He can say this particular has gone down, but he cannot tell the full story if he's not collaborating with, let's say, actually the actual salespeople who own that piece, or the actual operations people who are owning that piece, right? So I think FP&A today, as we see it, is almost a role where the FP&A person has to be in and out with all these teams almost at a daily level. He needs to be a business partner. He needs to be a colleague rather than a finance guy. And only then FP&A can really succeed in a company.
Got it. So technically it's a finance function, but more or less operates like a business unit.
Absolutely, absolutely. You summarized it.
Raghava, what are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. I think, Auro said it very, very well. It's one function, which works with rest of the other functions, right? Like there is one common thread that runs in the organization, and FP&A is that thread, right? Which stitches what's happening in each of these functions, ability to tell a story holistically and take actions on it. I think Auro summed it beautifully.
Perfect, perfect. Great. So Raghava, this one's for you specifically. So tell me, what are the key data sources and the types of data that FP&A teams generally use? And how would you say they contribute to the accuracy of the decision making?
Sure. So given the scope, right, that we just discussed, what FP&A does, there are large number of tools that FP&A would depend on, not just the finance tools, right? Be it the operation tools, marketing tools, because now data is sitting across different tools, irrespective of the function. FP&A team would need all of those insights to tell the story the correct way, right? Probably 4 or 5 years back, it used to be heavily finance data driven, storytelling. I think one major transformation in the last 4 or 5 years is addition of non-financial data or operating data to financial data, right? So that way, these sources have gone up. Earlier, 4 or 5 years back, it used to be typically the ERP, typically the invoicing solution, the compliance side solution, right? You try to figure out post facto what has happened, what worked and what has not worked. Today, in the last 4 or 5 years, given the kind of transformation FP&A function has seen, real-time insights from tools like, say, marketing, for example, right? The CRM side, just to understand how the pipeline is getting built. Will the pipeline lead to the kind of revenue that is planned? And is the forecast in line with pipeline? On the CRM side, on the marketing side, is my, the ad spend, for example, in line with the revenue that I'm generating or the leads that I'm generating? Or are there enough people on the organization, right? In the organization, just to ensure they can drive sales, for example, which means HRMS tools would be used. Am I getting the payments the right time, which means payment gateways would be used. So a bunch of tools like ERP, CRMs, payment gateways, marketing tools, HRMS tools. Every function that uses tool would end of the day, have some kind of information which is used for forecasting, planning, budgeting. So which is where the scope is much larger from a tooling standpoint in FP&A, Guru.
Got it, got it. To make this sound a little funny, the more the products that come up in the future, the more difficult it is for the FP&A teams to sort of manage data, right? And
Absolutely.
just picking up from something that you said, Raghava. So you mentioned that earlier it used to be just the traditional data metrics that you look into. Now there's a lot of other data points that are coming into the picture, and the whole analysis needs to take that into account. So to both of you, this is one question that I wanted to ask, which is, how is this increasing availability of data impacted the performance, the whole planning, whole operations of the FP&A teams?
Or you want to take it? I'll probably add on top of that.
Sure, perfect. Yeah, so I think, Guru, the first thing is that there is a lot more data which is getting tracked through different tools, like what Raghav mentioned, right? Now, what this has done is there is a population of data. So initially, the data used to be restricted to our profit and loss account, balance sheet, cash flow, and the analysis coming out of that, right? But now metrics which come in through this data, which go as far as how much an engineering person has spent on a particular project through the Jira tickets, etc., actually help the company understand where and what it is leading to. So going back to this engineering example, for example, if an engineering guy is spending, let's say, X hours on a project, the project for which the ROI is very small, then is it time well spent? Is the money being spent on that engineer going towards the right project? An analysis of that coming from different data points such as the Jira trick kits, the software, the product being built, its consequent ROI. These sort of things kind of link together and show as a result that where is that money getting spent? And this loops back into FP&A, whose essential job is understanding where the money is going, planning for it, and providing the results for it, right? Now,
Got it.
this example as such, it's got nothing to do with the PNL, right? Because on the PNL, that engineering is just a small line on the salary bucket. But what that small line is actually doing for the company and where it is resulting, which in turn will result into sales, I think that entire links gets captured through data. So yeah, multiple such data sources all across the company, operational, employee related, even general admin. All of this actually help tell a story and make it even more robust. And
Got it.
please add on.
No, absolutely. I think this is a growing trend as well, Guru. You will see more and more tools being adopted by each function, which means, you will see data fragmented across tools. Tools don't talk to each other, right? Which is where, again, today FP&A does a lot of things by talking to, either the data teams fetching the data, then talking to the functional leaders, right? Be it marketing head, sales head, understanding the story behind those numbers, and then stitching it at an overall level.
Right.
One more, as we talk, there's disruption happening in the finance space. You will see tools, which would integrate with multiple sources, try to identify the story, help insights come out of the tool itself, which means the finance leaders or FP&A leaders who typically they spend today probably 50-60% of their time in identifying the insights. The transformation will change from identifying insights to actually getting the KPIs delivered by working with business leaders. So that while the number of tools would go up, you will also see tools which will help in consolidating the data from different tools and ensuring the data tells the story the right way. And then a lot of bandwidth of finance teams would also be opened up to really work as real business partners for the CXOs across the organization.
True, true. So that was something that actually I wanted to ponder more upon, which is mostly because given the more amount of data that each and every finance leader is, given with, it's extremely cumbersome for them to go through it and then bring up some insights. Rather, if there's a technology that's also covered that, and then helps them gather insights much easily so that they can quickly make decisions and help the CFO, the rest of the finance team, as well as the business unit heads. It's a lot easier, right? Great,
Absolutely.
perfect.
In fact, just to add here, that's one of the value props that we drive out of Bluecopa as well, right?
Oh,
Because that's the
yeah.
transformation journey, that the whole finance function is going through. We are, in fact, helping to some extent in that journey, Guru. Anyway, we'll cover that in subsequent, topics.
Perfect. Sure thing. Great. Aaron, this one's for you in specific. So, according to you, what does the future of FP&A look like in the context of the emerging data-related technologies or data tech, as we call it? And how can organizations be prepared for such a change? Because digital transformation is something that all CFOs are now encountering in terms of one of the primary KPIs, right? One of the top 3 KPIs. So how would you say, the future of FP&A looks like with the data related technologies coming up, and how would the FP&A leaders react to it?
Yeah, great question. I think data is going to be the forefront for the future, right? And I feel FP&A is the team which will be the force in every company driving that. Why FP&A will be the first is because FP&A has the privilege of having a holistic view right from the top to understand what is happening all around the company. Like what Raghav mentioned earlier, it's the one link across the company, right? Having that holistic view kind of understands or gives the understanding to the FP&A personnel to see the data linkages. Now, data being heavy, that means that data is also flowing through that link somewhere. If someone who's right at the top can observe it, understand the business, understand the value of the data, and can track that entire data chain, he will be the one who can actually enforce that data to tell a story. Now, when we say automation can only be successful when the person understanding that automation and knows why that automation is happening, what is the purpose behind that automation, and what is the end result that automation is going to bring. I feel FP&A being the crucial department that it is, they will be the ones who can understand and make sense of the data better than anyone else. Because just to take an example, a sales guy will look at the same data and look from his sales target and say, hey, I need to achieve this much more to in order to get my commission. Or the operations guy will just look at his SLAs and his TATs and say, okay, this data, I am not reaching my TATs, I'll reach my TATs just to meet the SLAs. But now maybe the sales guy reaching his target or the operations guy reaching his targets of the SLA.
Holistic view of things, just like you said.
Yeah, those are probably not merging together into what the company's vision is, right?
Yeah.
The sales guy might do it by spending X amount of dollars or having too many orders. If too many orders are there, can the operations team actually deal with it? Maybe not. Maybe they do not have the infrastructure to deal with it, right? But FP&A, understanding that entire linkage and understanding the link
Yeah.
allows them to say, okay, you read your data this way, you also read your data this way, or everyone is right. But from a company standpoint, giving it a more broader direction and a channel to flow through is what FP&A actually provides. It cannot say don't do this or don't do that. That's a traditional finance approach of saying no to stuff, but rather guiding and saying if you do this, this will be what the long term of the company is looking like and what the short term is going to be as well. So yeah, I feel FP&A will be the champion and probably the CFO's best friend going forward.
Aren't they already the best friend? I'm guessing so.
Yeah, I think right now the CTO is the CEO's best friend and the CFO is still a little bit below, so the FP&A doesn't get that much visibility. But yeah, in the future, I feel finance people are going to drive product as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think with the tech advancements today and the sort of need for technology, especially in finance technology, I think CIOs will be your best friends for the years to come, right? If I'm predicting this.
Exactly.
Perfect, great. Raghav, this one's for you. So what competitive advantages do you think, general finance teams or FP&A teams in specific, get by leveraging data effectively? And how is that different from the traditional way of managing FP&A teams have been in the past?
Got it. This is, brilliant question. This again translates to the transformation journey that the whole, finance function is going through, right? So traditional finance is now becoming strategic finance, right? Which means more insight driven, more data driven, more tech driven, right? So for any organization to thrive in this whole, data explosion, decade that's coming up, every finance function, particularly the FP&A function, which relies on data across the organization, which stitches the data, which tells the story in the right way, would really benefit out of it. The reason being, lot more real-time finance observability solutions would come up. You will have data on your fingertips, right? Which means you can take decisions on the go. So one of the customers that we work is a B2B e-commerce player. Now the challenge there for the CFO is that there's no visibility in the P&L till say 10th or 15th of such subsequent month. This used to be the case, which means, CFO is already working on stale data, and that is already changing. They add, say, 2-3 dark stores every month, right? And you figure out what's not working 60 days or 45 days down the line. It's really stale data. No CFO is really looking to do that. Now, every CFO wants to act instantly, which means you will need to leverage technology. You will need to understand data real time. You will need to stitch the data across different functions. Like the good example that Auro said, right? What's happening on sales side? Orders are getting booked. Do I have the right kind of operations team to manage that kind of volume? Do we have inventory if it's a commerce company to service the customer? Right? That level of data matching should happen real time. Only then finance or FP&A teams value would come out. And with data being at the forefront, any organization which has FP&A team which is brilliant on data front will be the winner clearly in this race. So clearly, the strategic finance is the way ahead. That's where data would come in, and organizations that invest on data, invest on upskilling FP&A team to understand how data works, how basic technology works, how do you leverage technology to get output, in terms of storytelling, in terms of giving what is needed from an operation standpoint to respective CXOs would benefit immensely, Guru.
Got it. No, I think one of the points that I certainly agree with you is that CFOs working with stale data, right? Most cases, given the lack of real-time technologies, a lot of CFOs generally take the decisions for yesterday with the data of day before, Right? They never plan for today or for tomorrow with the data that's available. Having said that, I have a follow-up question on that, which is directed to both of you, which is how do you measure the ROI of such investments, right? The investments in data analytics and FP&A platforms in specific. How would you quantify the ROI part of it? Because we've been talking about data, we've been talking about the importance of how FP&A drives the whole business narrative. But how do you quantify it? There's a measure to it. But how do we quantify it?
I think Auro has explored a lot of tools than me. You would be the right person to pitch in here.
Yeah, I explore a lot of tools and still I don't have the right answer for this. I think this is probably one of the most subjective questions which comes across whenever a CFO and a CEO is having this discussion, right?
Yes.
To every CEO or most of the company, they would rather spend that dollars towards sales, towards getting the business, towards getting the revenue. Whereas the CFO would understand where that data value will actually bring in the long run, right? I think measuring ROI for these is not too straightforward in most cases, because more than the tools, it also depends on how you're using those tools and who is using those tools, right? And before that, even taking a step back, is that what is the data architecture and are you actually having the right data, first of all, in place to have the tools? You can have the best of the tools, but if your data is not good, it's basically garbage in, garbage out, right? So I think that's where the part comes in, that firstly you have to define what is the priority of data to a company. Let's say if it's like e-commerce, like in my previous experiences, data at a line at a transaction level is super important. Every transaction tells a story. So that means we have to have a data architecture sorted and ready. In that case, the ROI would be very secondary because it is absolutely critical for the business. So even if it's expensive to build a right data architecture, we have to do it because even the salespeople, the operation people, everybody would be aligned that every transaction line item actually has its unique story, right? Now comes the part where usually the debates happen on what is the tool. The sales guy might want a Salesforce, the operations might want a warehouse management system, whereas the finance guy might want, let's say, Bluecopa. So why give Bluecopa the budget over something like a TMS or a Salesforce is where the question comes in. I think that now depends on how that finance person wants to structure his business and show it as a data. Going back to what we initially spoke, if finance in the company is just a reporting function, is just a tool function, then there is no use of having any data tools. You can manage through, QuickBooks, Zero, any of these tools, and you can get to and you can present your P&L balance sheet to the board. But if the company and the finance as a function sees itself and the CEO sees it as a strategic function, as a finance business partner, then the tools make a lot of sense. Now, how I used to do it, at least my CEO to get any tools budgeted off, is to show what I can do with that tool. So something like, let's say, going back to this example, Salesforce is also approved, TMS is also approved, and Bluecopa is also approved, for example. Bluecopa is fetching in the data from the warehouse management system. It's fetching in the data from the Salesforce system as well. It's consolidating it. Now, combining these, if I can actually show a story that the sales performance is actually linking with our warehouse management systems, like what Raghav mentioned, inventory management in the case of e-commerce, which directly ties in with sales. That is something which would not have been possible if, let's say, a Bluecopa was not there. And there is where the ROI kind of comes in to show that you have multiple different data sets, data tools working in. How can you actually bring them all into one place, get them all into a sync, and tell a story out of it? That story needs to have 2 or 3 main important things. One, it needs to be quantitative. That means it should not be, okay, sales did well, did not well. It should be sales did well by X% due to this particular region going up by X% due to the performance of XYZ sales agents doing so and so. So quantitative. 2, I think it needs to tell where we are today and it needs to tell that real time. So data which is real time is super critical. I think one of the challenges I personally faced is we had a lot of sales agents on the ground. Now, at any given point of time, the performance of the sales agents we would get to know only 7 to 14 days later. These agents would work on an incentive scheme. By the time that 7 days or 14 days is done, the incentive scheme makes no sense because the market has changed already. If we had that data real time and had that visibility, we could probably make a variable incentive scheme and help boost sales, right? So I think in those cases, the ROI ties in directly with your sales. So as a metric, you can show that I brought in this visibility, which led to X amount of sales increase. Or
Right,
same way in the case of logistics, warehousing, or event operations, that how it is actually bringing the cost down.
right,
So quantitative, qualitative, clear real-time visibility, and most of all is that the data firstly needs to be correct. It should not be just
correct.
random data coming in and processing. Wrong data is the biggest devil in the
Garbage in, garbage out is the strict no. Rule.
yeah, absolutely.
Got it, got it. So there's a very
Brilliant,
funny
brilliant
question.
answer.
Yeah. There's a very funny question that has come up, which is, generally for all tech purchases, or at least software purchases, the end buyer is the CFO. And this is a CFO tech. So now who gets to decide, do you have the budget or not? A very interesting question. And I think India wants to know.
Yeah, the budget is always mine. So I would say the budget is always owned by the CFO.
Right,
How I look at it is that if the CTO wants a product or the CPO wants a product or someone wants a product, they need to forecast it before the product is actually procured, right? It needs to factor into their vision and then into the overall budget. After that,
right,
when the budget product comes in, it's already accounted for, then it's in the budget. But if it's a surprise product, then it goes back to your previous question that does that surprise product that we want to purchase have an equivalent ROI to it?
right,
I'm as a finance guy, I'm willing to go above budget if it has the value add to the business, right?
right.
But at the end of the day, yeah, I would say the budget is still owned by the CFO.
Right, right. Also with Raghava, it's very interesting because Raghava's been a finance leader and a co-founder now. So Raghava has double advantage in terms of choosing the budget. What are your thoughts,
No, no,
Raghava?
no, no. Just to add to what Auro said, right? ROI is the thing that drives. One thing that I've seen, I usually interact with at least hundreds of CFOs every quarter, right? Irrespective of procurement happening in finance function or outside the finance function, ROI is one metric that they calculate mentally, and that comes very, very naturally. I've seen finance leaders also, the moment you pitch a tool, irrespective of how much value add the tool would bring in, the first thing they would try to understand is, is this the ROI that I would really need to do I get the ROI that I really need from this particular tool? Is it the right timing, right? Do I have the need? Do I have the data architecture in case of Bluecopa that Tara mentioned? So those things are very, very structured. Obviously, given finance, the CFO is the end approver of most of the purchasing decisions, right? Having seen multiple tool procurements happen, it comes very, very naturally. So I think irrespective of tool being purchased by finance function or any other function, ROI is the metric that would be driven. And Auro put it brilliantly. It's not just the way ROI is computed is not anymore just quantitative. It's a mix of qualitative, quantitative, and bunch of other things.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Very true, very true. So in one of the interesting conversations that I had with a CFO very recently, he mentioned that the ROI for their FP&A software implementation was the learning curve, right? Which is not
Absolutely
something that most of the CFOs tell you. It's very subjective, like you said. That
correct.
CFO wanted his team to adapt to the software very quickly as possible, as opposed to another CFO who would say, no, I want my decisions to be taken faster, which is again a different
Correct.
subjective answer to it. So that way, yes,
Absolutely.
I totally comply with what you said. And out of this one's for you in specific, in what ways can FP&A teams collaborate with other departments? I know we've covered this in a very brief fashion. You told me how they work with, they partner with multiple business unit heads. But if you could just go a step further and tell us in what ways the teams collaborate with other departments, and what are some best practices that you recommend for such leaders, to leverage data, to improve collaboration, to bring in more business value.
Sure. Yeah, I think we touched upon it a bit earlier, but so I feel as an FP&A person, the first and foremost thing is that if you need to collaborate, you need to understand that stakeholder management is super important. It is a very different stakeholder management when your stakeholders are, let's say, your CEO or your board, versus when you're speaking to, let's say, the head of sales or the head of operations. And tweaking your way of method and your understanding and what you want to convey becomes critical for an FP&A person. If I go to the sales guy and tell him directly, hey boss, I need this target from you, but I'm not going to give you this budget. He will immediately, he will listen to me because I am the CFO, but he will not let me into his process. Right.
Yes.
So I think what I at least do is I try to understand from their lens, their view, what is it that they need. So if you understand from their lens, there might be particular nuances which the CEO, the CFO, the board will not know, because these are the guys who are on the ground. They're doing it day in, day out. They
Right.
understand the business better than anyone else, right? So first, understanding from their point of view becomes critical, both sales, operations, be it any department. If as an FP&A leader, you can get that understanding, then the next step becomes how do you fit this into your business model and your board targets. Obviously, in most cases, what will happen is you will not be able to say yes to everything which the sales or the operations guy would want at the go, right? But how to make that a milestone driven approach, that if you want something like this, let's get to, let's say, a 60% stage or a 50% stage first, and then let's move on to a phase two of 70%. Then let's go into the end journey that you're looking for in terms of 100%. Now,
Right.
this phases and milestones can also have their relevant tools attached to it. It can have hiring attached to it. It can have a budget, a sales budget, operations budget attached to it, discount, coupons, promotions, anything, right?
Got it.
So I feel communication is key. And
Right.
in that communication, how to say no while saying yes becomes super important. I think diplomacy is something FP&A professionals should have or imbibe in them. I think that's a quality that I always check whenever I interview anyone for FP&A. That
Right.
are you a direct person? Yes, good, but do you have diplomacy skills as well?
Yeah.
Right. Now, I think other than that, what comes in is the data flow. Usually, the finance departments of a company are the most organized ones, or should be at least the most organized departments, right?
Very true.
How to actually trickle down that organization that the finance person inherently brings in to the other departments becomes important. So simple stuff for smaller startups at least is just make a simple template. Instead of the sales guy making his own Excel sheet, his boss making another Excel sheet, the junior guy making another Excel, have one template. Work on that template. Let that template come to finance. Same way for
Yeah.
operations, have a template. Now those templates can, let's say, be uploaded to a G sheet or a tool, collated in the way you want it to be. But simple hacks like that in terms of how to make them more organized and structured, make it really easy. A few things which I used to employ in my previous organizations was for the salespeople, let's say, I would tell them, make your own budget first. Take as much money as you want. No worries. You take as much money, you tell me how much you can get to. Now, how much you can get to based on that budget, but how you're doing it. So I would make another tab for them, which would essentially be a few key levers, 3 or 4 key levers of the business. And maybe you're spending X dollars, so your CAC is Y, so you'll get
Mhm.
this customer, or
Right.
vice versa, or anything of that sort, right? Those 3, 4 key levers is effectively a summarized version of the business model that we finance people operate with.
Right.
But giving that finance, the sales guy, that organization and platform to kind of just key in the numbers on his will,
Yeah.
at least gets the FP&A guy the mindset or the mentality to understand where he's coming from, that these numbers are not out of thin air. He has something in his head. He's not able
Right.
to explain it when you're asking him verbally, but giving the template, giving the structure, is actually able to give it. And that's what leads to a good planning. Uh, in terms of the last part of analysis, I feel firstly, yeah, data visibility is key. And giving time to the respective people to digest that data is also important. So
Right.
I think another thing which has come across from me many times is that finance people look at numbers and they'll quickly say this is going up, this is going down, but the opposite side of the table might not be able to read it that as that fast, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So giving that guy, the other departments, some time to digest that data, understand it, come back with their own conclusion rather than just making your own conclusion as a finance guy and throwing at them, also becomes important, which then ties back again to my initial point about communication and stakeholder management.
Right. 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 Well, that's true. That's true because the interpretation time is very subjective to each and every leader. At finance, again, like you said, having dealing with numbers on a daily basis, they are able to tell you, okay, this goes up, this goes down, and this is a problem, and this is why you should solve for it. But even let's take marketing for example, which is where I spend every day on. So let's say I work with the finance leader, they would tell me, okay, your CAC is going extremely high and this is not a good sign. So I would have to now then sort of come up with a story, or at least get more deeper and understand why is the CAC going high, right?
Exactly.
So that's where and that's exactly where I would need a platform that shows me why it's happening. Right? It's not just about going up or down; it's about the why. Perfect,
Exactly.
Raghava. So I have
Absolutely.
I have a question that's in parallel or in tandem with the same one, which is given what Auro said, given what the ideal FP&A partner looks like, what do you think the future of FP&A or FP&A leader looks like in the context of these emerging data technologies?
So, like I said, right, there is transformation happening in finance function. This is happening across the globe. It doesn't matter if you're an enterprise, if you're into mid-market, if you are SME segment, all of that. Data is going to explode big time, particularly with proliferation of SaaS tools. Now with AI coming in, you will start seeing more and more tracking, data collection happening across functions, which means any finance person, doesn't matter at what level you are, right? You might be an FP&A leader, FP&A analyst, entry level, mid level, it doesn't matter. Having that knack of understanding the data, ensuring you are able to stitch the story end to end is going to play a very big role. And then the point that Auro touched upon, right? Communication, right? Not just knowing the story. How do you communicate the story to the other leaders? How do you ensure they understand from their perspective and then actions are taken? So diplomacy is the point that Auro said, right? That
Right.
skill set again plays a very, very important role going forward. Some bit
Got
of
it.
technology understanding might be needed. I'm not talking about code, nothing of that sort. There are enough tools today to help you massage the data. There are enough tools that will help you, to put the structure in which you can present the data to all the stakeholders. To
Right.
some extent, those tools would be needed. I think the future finance leaders, particularly from now on till say next 1 decade, would upskill on these parameters, in addition to obviously having the functional expertise, right? There's nothing which will beat your functional expertise. You need to understand P&L, you need to understand revenue, expenses, cash flow, all of that. That's going to be a parity feature. Somebody who would excel is someone who would really have rest of the other things like data side, intelligence, understanding bit of technology, understanding the diplomacy aspect and things like that.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Perfect. All right. So there's this one question I really got to ask. So with this chat GPT coming in, how do you think is it going to impact the whole FP&A function? I had to ask it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I've already seen a few live case studies for this. I
Yeah.
mean, I was at this conference the other day, and someone has deployed ChatGPT to take care of their entire reimbursement process. So,
Mhm.
so that is pretty interesting to see that ChatGPT is actually allowing the employees to understand which code it needs to. So the employee doesn't need to think which code to put in; just puts in his bill, automatically gets read and gives the
Yeah.
answer. It's quite brilliant. I think it's picking up well. I used it myself the other day to write up a small executive summary about shrimp farming because I'm still very new to shrimp farming in Aquarev. So I wanted
Right.
ChatGPT to provide me some thoughts and expertise.
Right.
It did give me a lot of good insight. So yeah, not complaining about it.
I
Absolutely.
think I don't think any finance professionals are going to, and I think there's going to be a lot of AI adoption into finance as well. But Raghu, what are
Absolutely.
your thoughts with
Yeah,
regards to
yeah,
it?
undoubtedly. I think AI is something which is disrupting every industry, right? Not just finance, be it marketing, sales, HR side of things, finance in particular. Particularly, you think about finance consulting, wealth management. There have been a lot of use cases already. I've seen, like Oro, many companies who have already adopted, the solutions out there. Particularly in the context of finance operations, right? The garbage in, garbage out problem that we were talking, which is the fundamental layer of data, right?
Yeah.
If your data is not right, whatever analytics you do, whatever AI you deploy on top of that, typically would be incorrect. I think we have seen solutions, particularly at Bluecopa, right? We have already incorporated that AI module in a transformation layer. Now one of the major challenges why there's garbage in, garbage out is that the processes are manual, right? Somebody is updating invoices, someone by mistake might update invoice twice, or 1 0 could be extra, or forgets to update say country code, for example. or forgets to or updates a country incorrectly by, for example, right? Such anomalies are all detected via the transformation layers that are built using AI. So I think clearly AI is going to disrupt every function, including finance function.
Right, right.
Since the fundamental layer is data layer, I think we have already seen disruptions happening in that layer. Like I said, we ourselves have disrupted in that layer. The second analytics layer is also something where disruption is going to happen. We have also built
Well
some
said it.
preliminary use cases like you can ask, we call it junior, in fact, in Bluecopa. You can ask the
Okay.
junior, hey, sales has gone down compared to last month. Please throw me insights into what has happened. Right? It will figure out, okay, your sales has gone down by 20%. It has gone down because X geography did not perform well. Within the X geography, these 2, 3 business lines did not perform well. And probably, these are bunch of customers which led to that drop. Right. So you can go to that level. So earlier,
Right.
imagine getting this data, talking to multiple data guys, functional leaders, collating the data, identifying that story used to be a major challenge. Clearly, you see, a lot of disruption happening in that space. I think, couple of years down the line, there would not be anything other than AI, that people would start interacting with from a data standpoint. From a data
That's true.
standpoint, I mean,
That's true.
otherwise, your diplomatic skills, talking to other leaders will all remain the same. But the data side is where heavy disruption is happening in the transformation that we are talking about, which is finance transformation.
So, like you mentioned, the 50-60% time they spend on data cleansing plus data, understanding and analyzing data now sort of gets reduced to probably 10-15% because AI does the
Correct.
rest. And
Absolutely.
in a different way, I would like to put forth this message that a lot of people are worried that AI is going to replace them, but most essentially AI is going to augment your performance. Even with FP&A, I'm guessing you both will agree with me as well. Now, let's say the insights come in for the FP&A leader. Now, he or she can go to the CFO or go to the CEO with more context of what can be solved, right? He or she is not going just with the problem, not saying, hey, with the CAC has gone high or the the account contract value ACV has gone down. We are going to go with the story that this is why it's happening and this is how we're going to solve it. So now this enables an individual FP&A analyst or a finance leader or the CFO for that matter to have more, to present the problem with more context, right? So that they can
Absolutely.
get to the solution faster. I think that way it's going to augment more than replace. And
Absolutely. I think
glad
replace,
that you folks agree.
absolutely, rather than replace it, it is the upskilling that will take some time. Other than that, I don't see, a lot of people being, out of the jobs, nothing of that sort. Again, FP&A as a function, right, is still very small. Say out of 100 companies, maybe 10, 15 companies have a dedicated FP&A, unit. Probably
Right.
with AI coming in with tools like Bluecopa, you will start seeing 30, 40, 50 companies having FP&A function because it's easier to tell the story. It's easier for you to figure out what's happening. Now, because it's very costly, not everybody understands, right? Not many organizations build a separate FP&A function. So that way, I
Correct.
think it's only going to increase or expand the FP&A teams globally rather than, thinking from a standpoint which is it'll cut down people, people will lose jobs and things like that.
Right. Now, I think the
Would I,
strategic finance comes into perspective.
perfect. Yes, absolutely.
Got it. Aro, this one's for you more specifically because you've done that multiple times and you're still doing it even today, which is what are the challenges have you faced in terms of building a data-driven culture within your organization, having built multiple 0 to 1 finance teams? What's your take on that? What are the challenges you have faced in building a data-driven culture, especially within finance or at least across the organization? And how do you address it? Let's say if that's lacking today in an organization, how do you address it?
Yeah. I think it's a very interesting question because there are different stages of challenges which come through. When the company initially starts off, the idea is to launch it, get more customers, and begin, right? At that time, data really takes a backseat. But due to that, what happens is in the first 6 months to 1 year of a journey, your data structure goes for a toss. So that is effectively that 1 year of garbage data you have in a system. So I made that mistake myself in previous setups when I was also new to it. So now I think one of my learning lessons is at least going forward that right from day one, do not build a very complicated data structure, but just have something which at least has the right amount of data coming in and the correct amount of data.
Right.
Raghav mentioned about extra zeros. I live in Indonesia, which is full of zeros, right? Everything is millions, billions, and all that.
Yeah,
So those simple things actually, in terms of a data standpoint, lead to a big loss of interpretation, misinterpretation when the company goes into. And at that time, you're already at a stage where you cannot really go back and correct all your previous data. So
right.
probably one of the first lessons is have a not the most accurate data set, at least initially, but a good data structure.
Correct.
The second part comes in to, especially this comes in not with the finance people, but the sales and the operations people, is getting them to use data and bringing the data visibility and the use of the data visibility. Normally, especially in the initial journey of a company, the sales guy will be like, boss, I don't have time to give you data visibility. I would rather go and close 5 deals, right? But understanding and giving the importance that what his previous 4 deals is actually bringing that data visibility and how that data of what he's already done can help him to
Yeah.
close his future deals. I think bringing that understanding is a culture which the company and has to be driven through finance and through the CEO and the management, that data actually speaks a lot of things. So even if there are 10,000 good things happening, data needs to be, if not one, but if not at least in the top 5 of those important things happening in the company. Right.
Right.
So bringing the importance of data understanding. The third part right from the start for data is understanding how do you want that data to proceed in the future. Today, you have maybe one city, 2 cities, but in the future, there'll be hundreds and thousands of cities.
Mhm.
Would the templates that you're building today be sufficient to manage it later? Would a Google Sheet work, or would you need, let's say, uh, something like a Bluecopa 1 year, 2 years down the line, for example? So obviously, as a CFO, you cannot implement a Bluecopa or a ERP or anything from day one. You would have to wait a little bit of time in order to get to that stage. But understanding that journey and having the clarity of the journey within the finance function and at least aligned with the management of the company, that these are going to be the different milestones in terms of data and a tech adoption of platforms for the company, specifically from a finance point, which
Right.
will bring benefit to the company. So as and when the company gets to those milestones, you bring in those, starting to bring in those data. So
Right.
let's say, in my previous example, when we were a free seed company, we were just operating purely on Google Sheets shared between my small team of 3 people. But as and when we started scaling up, there are different milestones we hit. We hit Series A, Series B. My team went from 3 to 32. So obviously, it will not be possible to manage in the same Google Sheet way, right? And that's where the tech comes in.
Right.
But what I feel is there are 2 ways to approach to that problem, right? You have suddenly expanded and you don't know what to do, or before you expand, have a broad charter in your head of what you need to do, so that when those milestones comes, it's easy for you to kind of incorporate that. And this
Correct.
flows back into the annual plans and everything, right? So plan ahead of time. Um, and I think the last part which I've seen is when bringing in new tools. This is a bit later on in the stage after the company has already done the 0 to 1. Is that there might be some resistance to change. People are happy using the methods they're using. They will say, "What's the problem? What's the loss actually?" Um, and why should I spend some more time to learn this tool and then again use it? So I think that is a resistance to change which will be there. There's no way to remove it. But the best way to mitigate it is again to plan ahead and tell people that as and when we progress, there will be tools coming in. And
Yeah.
again, like explaining to them the importance of those tools, how it will help them, not just the company. Because a field agent will not care if it is bringing you ROI from a finance lens. He will care if he's able to visualize his sales and his incentives. So if I
Right.
tell them, hey boss, today at the end of the month, you get to see how much sales you've done. But if you put in this tool and you help train and learn and use it on the field, you'll be able to see how much sales you've made every day. You'll be able to see how much incentive you're getting. He will be more inclined to actually adopt that tool. So that resistance to change and how to counter it, I would say, is the fourth point where um, in terms of the adoption of the tools and the data.
Got it. Got it. Perfect.
Brilliant.
All right. That brings me to the end of the questions that I had prepared, but we have a lot of audience interest as well. So let's quickly jump on to that and see what kind of questions have come up. Yeah. Perfect. All right. So we have the first question, which sort of goes, what level of data and tech understanding should finance leaders have?
Yeah, Raghav, you want to take that?
German?
Sure. So earlier, right, probably 3, 4 years back, in fact, I was also under the impression that, basic SQL skills would be needed to fetch data, given data is now residing in multiple places. Also, when you talk to data teams, you don't want to look, incorrect, or you don't want to look very naive when you say, hey, can you give me that data? And then the data guys would start talking in their terminology, right? That probably the data warehouse schema is in this format, that format, and things like that. I was always under the impression that you might need some basic, data side, architecture side learning. But I think clearly that is not how the whole industry is transforming, right? Today, uh, all you need is how do you read the insights and tell the story? That's one. What are the tools that you have in hand that you can use? For example, to get, say, real-time insights, you might need a tool like Bluecopa, for example, or to write content. The example that Auro said, right, to figure out some blog content, you use tool like Chat GPT. So tools like that, you will need to know. You will need to know how to use the tools. Earlier, it was predominantly Excels and PPTs that finance teams were dependent on. Now, I think in addition to those tools, you will see people adopting to tools like Bluecopa, to Chat GPT, based on your use case. You are no more just a traditional finance guy. You are going to be a strategic finance guy, which means end-to-end story, being diplomatic, understanding, basics of data, basics of, for example, visualization and things like that are the only basic technical skills needed. The general skills like, having awareness about data security, data governance, so those are the skills that would be needed irrespective of the function role. It doesn't matter if it's FP&A or controller side, or any other function.
Got it. Got it. I hope you got the answer, whoever asked for it. Great. Aro, would you like to add anything to that?
And I think Raghav's covered that completely. So nothing to add on to that.
Perfect. Perfect. Great. Looks like the next one is, what approach do you suggest in terms of data cleansing? So here's where the zeros come into picture, Aro.
Yeah, I think the first part of data cleansing is admitting that the data is wrong. Not fighting that resistance that, hey, no, this might be right data. And so I think, yeah, first admit the data is wrong. The second part of data cleansing is understanding what level of cleansing is possible. Obviously, it cannot be the 100% data is cleansed if you're starting, picking it on the third year and you're looking at the first year data. So understanding how much is possible, how much is not possible, defining that. And the third part is that data cleansing, what sort of an impact does it bring? So if you're cleaning at some data which has very little impact, is it worth spending that time to clean that data in order to get the satisfaction that the data is clean? Or would you rather put that time into actually getting data sorted out, data structure, which is more critical and crucial to the business?
Right.
I think other than that, I think for data approach, one thing which learned a lot from the data teams for us is that not all data can be cleansed. So how do you actually mitigate that data and kind of have your own ways to model that data out so that it gives at least some legible information which can be used for future purposes?
Right.
Yeah, I guess that would be my approach to it.
Perfect. Raghav, having worked with
Awesome.
both data and finance team, what do you think?
No, I think, Aro summed it up really well, right? Having those structures in place. Also, like I said, be open to technology, right? There are tools that are there to help cleanse the data, at least identify probable anomalies, right? Embrace those solutions is the only addition to what Aro said.
More digital transformation is needed.
Absolutely. See, end of the day, FP&A is all, it starts with data while it ends with, actually getting the KPIs delivered. It starts with data, right? If your data is not clean, your story is not clean, you will not be able to convince any other stakeholder.
Right.
And you forecast incorrectly, which means you will not be able to get whatever business goals that you will need to achieve. If you don't solve the fundamental, issue, nothing else will work out. So I think investing time, energy, including money, right, which means adapting to technology, all of that is really important,
Right.
given the pace at which transformation is happening.
Right, very true. Because FP&A, I think, is one function where you can't start wrong and then think, okay, mid-course, I can probably course correct and get things to a right fashion. Would not work. If you're starting wrong, you'll evidently end up being wrong towards the end. Because it's a very cohesive, like you said, it's a spider web. It takes you through a journey and across multiple functions. Perfect, great. What, according to you, is the number one blocker of FP&A teams?
I think Raghav answered that already in his previous reply, because the number one blocker in my view is bad data.
Right.
If your fundamentals is wrong and your data is not good, then you can have as big as an FP&A team, it will have no value.
Right.
So I feel the number one blocker is that. And the second thing, maybe not for the young CFOs, so to speak, but maybe who are somewhere further down the ladder towards the later age group, is adoption of technology. A lot of the FP&A teams even today would not like to adopt technology and would like to stick with their initial or older ways of working. Maybe not the most beneficial way in terms of how the world is changing around finance. So being open to tech and bad data as the blockers, I would say, are the two key blockers for FP&A teams.
Absolutely, boss. The whole agenda of the discussion is data, bad data. So that's the number one blocker. Great. All right. One question has come up that's pretty similar in the light of AI, such as ChatGPT. Can you tell us how core FP&A function is affected and how did the impact the day-to-day responsibilities of FP&A teams?
I think there's a lot of interest on ChatGPT,
ChatGPT, I think,
particularly
yeah.
in particularly in finance forum, which is again really good, right? There's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
awareness about technology.
Right.
Amazing. Yeah. So I'll probably take it up, given we have spent some time building AI into the product, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Like I said, 60-70% of the time which goes into collating the data, consolidating, slicing, dicing, figuring out what is working, not what is not working, is all automated to some extent by ChatGPT or by AI in particular, right? It is definitely going to play an important role in probably automating the repetitive monotonous activities that teams do, open up a lot of bandwidth so that you actually become true strategic finance partners by telling the story to respective stakeholders, ensuring you are part of their journey and getting their KPIs delivered. So I think that's what is open. That's what is going to happen in the next couple of years, in terms of impacting the day-to-day activities. Like I said, your bandwidth will get opened up. Your accuracy of forecasting will go up, right? Your time to decision making will really come down. You can act really fast, really real time. So these are some of the benefits that you'll start seeing in the day-to-day activities that would come with AI.
Got it. To whoever who asked the question, I think you will have lesser meetings. I think that's something that I can promise. You won't have to go in a lot of meetings and give context. I think this Copilot will save a lot of time, right? Perfect. I think there's a lot of AI questions that come up. We sort of covered it in detail, so let's skip the next one. Okay, why don't SMBs hire FP&A teams? Interesting. I mean, why SMBs and FP&A teams? Good question.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Maybe two sides to
Yeah.
it. One, sometimes that FP&A is still underrated. Like
Yeah.
what Raghav mentioned, that most companies actually don't have FP&A teams because probably the value of FP&A to the larger audience is still not very clear.
Right.
I think so. From a traditional SMB lens, you would first hire the accountant, then you would
Yeah.
hire the payment operations guy, then you would hire someone just to manage your day-to-day operations, and right, everything after all that comes the FP&A. So that's where usually till the company leads into a larger point of the journey, the FP&A doesn't come in. And also, like personally hiring FP&A, sometimes the hires might be a bit tough because FP&A is still a budding function. So
Yeah.
not too many people come in with the relevant experience in order to understand data and read it like that. So
Right.
not easiest to hire as compared to, let's say, an accountant or a payment operations specialist.
Got it. No, I kind of shared the emotion of this person who asked the question, but I have a different question, which is slightly in tandem with this, which is so now every organization, irrespective of their size, right? Let's even take like a lot of startups that have come up, have this expectation with let's assume they are venture funded or they're bootstrapped, they have this responsibility of being profitable or having a good runway, being safe in terms of business growth, showing some ROI and everything. So isn't the need for an FP&A person in such teams absolutely essential? Or are we thinking this wrong?
It is essential. So what I think from my experience of, being part of a few SMBs also is that because your capital is very, very limited initially, right?
Yeah.
You would probably invest on things that would kill you today itself. For example, if you don't pay taxes on time, right, you will get a notice, you will end up, going around in circles and things like that, which is where early stage companies, when I say early stage, say if you are planning to take the funded route, typically still seed stage or pre-seed stage, there's heavy reliance on compliance side. Till then, anyways, it's typically the founder's vision that would drive, high level numbers that would drive, right? But as you grow, as your team grows, you need to ensure you have plans at function level. You have, somebody tracking very closely what is happening, what is not happening. Till you are, say, a team of 10 or 15, you can probably, hang out, you can understand what's happening, which is what, at a higher level, FP&A team also does the same thing, right? Which is collaboration with multiple stakeholders at a larger scale. But the planning
Right.
part is still missing in the early stage. But again, because you are smaller, your goals are probably 1-2, right? Maybe launch the product in 6 months, get to 1 million revenue, right? Everything else is a noise at that stage. But as you scale from 1 to a million to, say, 100 million, which is where you need a lot of structure, a lot of, different functions in place, a lot of, processes to be driven and things like that, which is where FP&A really plays a major role. I think
Right.
that's the journey that I've seen typically till pre-series A, right? It's heavily compliance focused. From there on, it's heavily FP&A focused. That's why when you talk to any Series A CFO versus seed stage CFO, the terminology itself is different, right? Can I get an invoice reconciled with my payments and things like that? Versus you talk to, say, Series A, Series B CFO, their question will be, can this open up an insight which will help me increase my revenue by 10%, 15%? Can I become a strategic finance partner to, say, my marketing team, because our CAC is going up big time? So things like that are, stage dependent,
Got it.
is what my reading is. Yeah.
Got it. To put it a little differently, the co-founder or the founder is the first FP&A employee until Series A.
Absolutely.
You're the person who's worried about the growth and the business continuity more. Perfect. That brings us to the end of the questions. Thank you, Raghava. Thank you, Auro, for taking the time and answering every single question that has come up. Genuinely, thank you. I think there's a lot of insights that our attendees are going to take up from this conversation. Folks, thank you everyone for attending this session. Really glad that you all took the time and are a part of it. We'll be doing more webinars. I think there's a lot of ChatGPT interest, so I think we'll do one on that as well. But yeah, thank you for everyone to join, and I'll connect you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. Thanks, Auro.
Thank you, Raghav. Thank you, Guru.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.